about the KOLBE assessment. It's a tool that companies, experts, and employers will use to measure the way individuals take action when they strive. So how can you use your personal, individualized KOLBE results to be more productive, less stressed, and even happier? Well, stick around because today on the Waist Up Wardrobe Show, my guest expert is going to explain all of this. So stick around. Welcome to Waist Up Wardrobe. I'm Christine Vartanian, a civil engineer and attorney turned personal style expert and image consultant. As the founder of Jade for All Seasons, I am passionate about unveiling the inner confidence of my clients by developing their personal style. But is getting dressed up still important in our virtual world? Well, that's where my experience can help with what I call Waist Up Wardrobe. Waist Up Wardrobe is a podcast for all things you need to conduct an outstanding Zoom meeting. It's about how to dress for the camera, but it's not just about the clothes. It's about everything you need to know to show up on brand and professionally for the camera. Join me in the Waist Up Wardrobe studio to discuss how to navigate this virtual world and dominate from behind the desk. Hello, Virtual Nation. Thank you for joining us for episode 97 of Waist Up Wardrobe, where we're bringing you a new, fresh show every single time. It's about entrepreneurship. It's about how to show up professionally on camera and off camera, but it's everything that relates to entrepreneurship and being in business for yourself. So, thank you for being here. We are on iTunes, so rate us, review us, download us, and listen to us, even if you can't watch. And I just want to start by saying thank you to my super awesome producer, Rick Moscoso, who is always here in the production room, making everything go around. There he is, peeking out his virtual head or his cartoon head. And he sometimes makes guest appearances on the show because we always love that gentleman's perspective that he has to offer. So today we have a really special guest who is an expert at deciphering and explaining and using the KOLBE assessment. And if you are in business for yourself, or if you are an employer, employee, or part of a company, it is likely that you've heard of the KOLBE assessment, and that it is a tool that companies use to see where to fit employees in certain positions in companies. But sometimes the results we get from KOLBE can be very voluminous and it would be hard to decipher. So today's show is designed to bring you an expert that can actually help you decode what your very own KOLBE assessment says about you and show you how to use the tool in the most optimum way. So allow me to brag a little bit about my guest. Kelly Tenney is a lifelong learner. She's an educator and curriculum expert. She's also a course strategist. Kelly has been teaching for over 20 years, empowering others through education. Her desire to empower even more led her to start her own company, Teach Your Brilliance. She offers curriculum creation and course strategy services to creators, influencers, and experts who are looking to turn their wisdom into wealth. So please help me welcome Kelly to the show and help me just really explore her brilliance today. Hi, Kelly. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
I am so thrilled because I will tell you, I can't tell you how many people I run into in business that will say, oh, I just got a KOLBE assessment for all these employees I potentially want to hire. But oh my God, all that information, I don't know how to sift through it. So this is a really important show for so many business owners and entrepreneurs because we are all familiar with this tool, but we sometimes don't really know how to use it. And it can be overwhelming. But before I get started, I just want to play a little game that we play at the beginning of the show. And it's like 60 seconds to get to know you on a personal level. It's super easy.
Okay.
It's answer that question. I'm just going to fire some questions to you, and you just the first thing that comes to your mind. Okay.
All right.
Okay. Running or swimming?
Running.
Tell me why.
Well, believe it or not, I was actually on the swim team in high school, which is really strange that I would now when I hated running in high school, but I've been a runner since probably, I think I started when I had my first daughter, which was, 12 years ago. And I've actually run 28 marathons.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's
28 marathons. And so people always ask me like, why do you run these marathons? And as a busy mom who also is a business owner, I find that running is the only time where people actually don't need me. So like I'm like, it's the only time nobody bothers me is when I'm actually on a run. So that's probably where my love for running grew, but I definitely prefer to be on the pavement and not in the swimming pool.
Well, that's very interesting. I didn't even know you had a history of swimming. So I guess kind
Yeah.
of both, but running is sort of that it fulfills that soul, right? You get like that soul fulfillment, which I totally understand.
Mhm.
Okay, one more question.
Okay.
Middle schoolers or college students?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I'm gonna have to say college students.
And tell me why.
So I think you know that I used to be a middle school health teacher. I was a middle school health teacher for 15 years, and now I teach at a local university here in Southern California. And I sometimes will joke and I will say they're kind of the same. Like middle school students and college students are not that much different. However, it's a lot easier for a college student to kind of pull back and pay attention. And so there's not so much fidgeting and disruption. They've learned manners for the most part by the time they get to college. So that's why I'm going to say college students.
And do you still teach at the college level?
I do. I still teach full time.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I love this little window into, your personal, other than you're more than just the Kolbe assessor
Yes.
expert, right? But let's dive right in. So tell us a little bit. We just want to lay a foundation for the audience. What is the Kolbe assessment?
So the Kolbe assessment is probably grouped in there with a lot of other personality strengths assessments and things like that. We know there's the Enneagram and there's the DISC and, there's human design. And so the Kolbe is right in that category, that umbrella of other strengths type of assessments. But the Kolbe is actually very unique and where, some other assessments measure things like intelligence, they measure personality, they might measure social style. But Colby actually measures instinct, which is what sets it apart from some of those other tests.
Yeah. And so when you're taking a Kolbe assessment, and we talked a little bit about this, there's no real negative results, right? It's more of just a tool of more knowledge about yourself. Can you explain that piece?
Yeah, and something that I love about Colby is for anybody who's taken the assessment or for anybody who is about to, you'll find at the end when you get your results, Christine, I don't know if you remember this, it says you got the perfect score. And it says that to everybody, which I really love because I think there are a lot of assessments that have, positive or more negative connotations. And the Colby doesn't do that. The Colby recognizes that regardless of your score is perfect. And what we can do from that is we can then have that inner knowledge and use the Colby to be more effective and more efficient in the way we do things. So I just love that. I love that piece. I love that take on it. Doesn't matter what your score is. All scores are good. And it really just gives you insight to who you are and the way you do things.
I think that's great. And it's nice because you feel like it's okay to share your scores. I know people always share their scores when it comes to Colby,
Yeah.
because, you don't feel like you're less than anybody
Right.
because you have a perfect score, just, measuring and assessing yourself, right? It's you versus you. So Susie Hickson is here, and she said she's been looking forward to this show and that she
Yeah.
likes that you differentiated why the Colby's different. Thank you
Mhm.
for being here, Susie. Susie is an attorney in Kentucky, and she oftentimes does join us for the show. So I'm glad she's here, and she is very interested in this topic. So, who uses the Colby? Is it primarily an educators, employers, or what has been your experience with that?
So the great thing about the Colby is because of the way they've layered the assessment, it really can be used by anybody. So, as you mentioned in my bio, I do a lot of online course creation. I love to know my clients' Colby scores when possible because it helps me structure the way I talk to them. The way I might. Help them build a timeline. It really gives me insight to the kinds of things that they're going to need support in. And So any entrepreneur, any person, single person can benefit from knowing their own Kolbe. But where we really see it, which I think is a different kind of perspective to the Kolbe also, is we see it a lot in small businesses and companies. So for example, Susie, I know Christine mentioned you're an attorney. If you have paralegals that you work with, if you have office administrators that you work with, it can really give employees some insight on who they are working with and their coworkers to really help them make sure that they are communicating in a way that is going to be easy and less stressful. And we see it also used by like leadership teams. So the C-suites in the companies, managers and the leaders in companies can use it to help better understand, one, the roles and the positions that they fill, and two, who they are working with and how they can best support the people under them. So it's really dynamic in terms of how the Kolbe can be used.
Yeah. And I took the KOLBE test because I had heard you talk about it. And I'm
Mhm.
so interested in the psychology of how people think in general and how I think and why I do the things I do. So I really get very intrigued by these tests. And
Yeah.
Kristen is here, Kristen Levine, and she's saying she's never taken this assessment. And how would she be able to do that if she wanted to? Can you give her some advice on that?
Yeah. So anybody can take the assessment by just going to kolbe.com. And that's KOLBE.com. And you'll see a little button on the top right hand that says take the Kolbe A index. And the Kolbe A index is the part that is just for us as individuals.
Yes. Okay. So Rick might be able to pop that here into the comments. Kolbe.com is where you can go take the Kolbe A for for individuals, which is what I took. And that's what we're going to get into next.
I can't
And,
wait.
and here's my little diagram. And apparently I am a 6734. That's how I hear people talk about it.
Mhm.
So that is going to be interesting to dissect a little bit. And because I have a perfect score, I'm not embarrassed to put it out
Yep.
there.
Yes. Yep. I
So
love it.
these four categories, let's break that down a little bit. It measures your fact find. It says the first column is fact finder,
Mhm.
follow through the second one, quick start, and implementer. Can you let's take them one by one, and can you just kind of explain what each one means?
Yeah. And before I explain what each one means, one thing that I do want to add that I think is important to understand is when you take the Kolbe, I said the Kolbe measures your instinct, but what it does is it's actually your score is reflecting your instinctive way of how you do things. And in the Kolbe world, they call it your MO or your method of operation, but it really it's going to give you a greater understanding of basically your human nature and how where your instincts are in terms of where you instinctively want to take action. So that's what the score means. So when we look at those four pillars, the fact finder, which is your first number, and your number was a 6, your fact
Mine,
finder.
yeah, mine was a 6. Uh-huh.
Okay, I'm a 6 too. In fact, I think our Kolbe scores are actually pretty similar. But your fact finder is going to provide insight on how comfortable you are with details. So you'll go from, one end to the spectrum, and like a 1 would be somebody who is not detailed oriented, who feels overwhelmed by details, and who potentially is one of those like, just give me the big idea. I don't need to know all the thing, right? And then on the other side of the scale for Kolbe, it's going to be someone who's very detailed oriented. So they want all of the details. You can't leave anything out. They love research, they love numbers, and you are a 6, which means you are kind of in the middle, but you're more inclined to want to know the details, to want to maybe have the research behind something, and so forth. You might not be somebody who spends all their time digging for it, but you certainly appreciate it and like to have details when you are in certain situations.
Yeah. So that
That's
is the fact finder
yes.
explained. And just before we move on to the next piece, Susie's asking if you've taken it in the past, should you take this periodically or do you not take it periodically? That's a really good question.
That is a really great question. And, I know a lot of these types of tests tell you that the assessments, the scores never change. But I truly believe that as things happen to us and as we evolve and as we grow, we do change. So I think that you could take one, I'd say maybe not necessarily every 5 years, but certainly if you've gone through some kind of life event, maybe a change in jobs, something that's maybe led you to saying, I need to do things in a different way. Kolbe believes that we go through transitions, which means that sometimes we're in limbo of how how we think we're being asked to do something and what our instinct is. And I think during these transition times, it can be really helpful to retake the Kolbe.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm so glad Susie asked that. So the next is the follow through.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
So follow through is not to be confused with following through. I get a lot of people that are like, oh, I got a low number. That means I'm not a good person to follow through. And it's totally different. So follow through is all about what your instinct is around arranging and designing, or how much structure you prefer. So somebody who is a higher number in follow through prefers more structure, more organization. I'm an 8 in follow through. So I really need, I need the outline, I need the agenda, I need the map, I need all the things. And then somebody who might be have a lower number on their follow through is somebody who's kind of like, they wing it, they go with the flow. They're kind of like, and Christine, I know we talked about this yesterday, but I'm going to share it because I think it's such a great example. The higher number on the follow through, we're the people that take out the instructions from IKEA. We make sure all the bolts are in order. Maybe we make sure they're color coordinated. And then the people who are lower numbers on the follow through might be those people that are like, I don't need the instructions. I'm just going to start building. Yeah. And my husband is very low on follow through, and it drives me crazy because I'm like, give me the instructions and let's count all the nails before we get started.
Exactly. And I have a high score on that as well. I have a 7 on that. So that's kind of my highest score actually with the Kolbe. So next would be your quick start.
Yes. So the quick start examines how likely a person is to take an uncalculated risk. So again, a lot of people go, oh, quick start. That means how fast I will take action. And it really is more around our instinct to jump in when there is a risk at hand. So somebody who is a lower number on the quick start is less likely to jump into action when they see that there are risks at hand. Somebody who is in the higher level of the quick start is kind of those people that are like, I don't know how deep the water is, but I'm going to jump in anyways. Right. I'm very low quick start. It's my lowest number. And I'm like, how cold is the water? How deep is the water? Which way is the current going? Right. I have to test the wind before I jump in. And so that's really around risk taking more than it is around action taking.
Interesting. So that is a really important distinction, right?
It is. Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't mean that you're not an action taker, because mine as well is very low. It's a 3, and I was like, but I am an action taker. That's like me. Totally. But I love that you distinguish that, because it is about the calculated risk. How much calculations you do before you take the risk, which kind of makes sense that I'm high on detail, because all those questions, right, that I asked to get to then jump in. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
So finally, the implementer. This is the one I know the least about. So I'm just curious for you to explain this one.
And it's funny with these names, because I know when we see the names, again, with the implementer, a lot of people will say wait a minute, but I implement. Does that mean that I don't implement? And that's not the case with the implementer either. The implementer is around your instinct to construct a solid solution. And so one of the things that they share with us when in the Kolbe consultation training, which I think is really helpful for everybody, is they talk about the movie Apollo 13. Do you remember the movie Apollo 13 with Tom Hanks, right?
Yeah.
And there's that conversation when they realize that the module is broken, right? And so you've got, I think it's Ed Harris who's on there, and he's like, we need to get them from here to here, right? And there's all those people, and they're throwing out solutions.
Yeah.
Those people would be what we consider low numbered implementers. They're visionaries. They can talk about the solution, they can come up with the vision and the idea. And then if you remember, then it goes to where they actually go and they build the thing and they just dump all the things on the table and they get to work and they start constructing like the actual hard solution of what it's going to look like. And that is where the higher numbers of implementers come in. So the implementer number is really an indication of, are you a visionary? Or are you someone who's like, I need you to show me a model of exactly how that's going to look?
Mm.
Yep.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
It is interesting, and I think it's really valuable when you're not only talking about yourself, and knowing your own score, but also in the workplace, because, I think that sometimes we wonder like, gosh, she's got this great vision and I just can't wrap my brain around what that would look like. Or you might have people that you work with that are like, you're like, this is the company's vision. And they're like, I don't get it. And we feel like there's a disconnect, but there really isn't a disconnect. It probably is a reflection of their implementer score, where it's like, well, if you just drew it out, or if you mind mapped it out, right? For those of us that like structure and organization, then I could kind of wrap my brain around it. So
Mm.
it's really that visionary versus that like, show me the hard picture of what that would actually look like.
Yeah. Like,
Mhm.
show me how that vision comes together. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yes. And there can be some really powerful partnerships, I think, between people who maybe are the visionaries. They might need somebody to come in and say, okay, let me take your vision and let me actually help you build it out, because that wouldn't be where their instinct would be.
Mm.
And vice versa. There's those people that maybe are like, I can only see what is in front of me, and they might need some support and like, let me help you vision, let me help you kind of come out of the box and start imagining what things could be like. So it's a really cool characteristic, I think. And I think knowing somebody's implementer score really can lead to some strategic partnering when it comes to growing businesses and being successful, having a more effective team, and so forth.
Yeah, because then you wanna join people to your team that sort of are on that sliding scale of different scores on the implementer scale, possibly, right?
Yeah, 100%. When we're talking about like you wouldn't want your COO, your chief of operations, to be a visionary, right? Like they need to be somebody who's like, let me build it out, let me structure it, and so forth. But
Yeah,
your CEO, for example, should probably be someone who is on the low implementer scale, someone who sees the bigger vision, and so forth.
yeah,
So that's where this really gets interesting in terms of building out teams and working within companies. Because obviously, a marketing person should be a visionary, right? But the financial officer should not be. They should be somebody who has hard numbers and so forth.
yeah,
And I think this insight is so valuable, again, not only for your own company. You might say like, oh, budgeting is so hard for me. Like the whole finance piece of my own business is so difficult. I feel like I can't run my business, when in reality, that's not true. It just might be your Kolbe is a reflection that your instinct isn't to be that detailed, isn't to have those hard numbers. And that's where, we can learn, maybe we should hire someone to help us with this piece.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, so what's the, like, highest score you can get in either any of these categories? Is it have you ever seen, like, is it a 10? What's the scale?
The scale is a 9.
Okay, so and there's no 0, I would imagine.
There is no 0.
Okay, so it's 1 or 1 to 9. Have you
Yes.
seen scores that high or that low?
I see a lot of scores that are 9s,
Mhm.
which is interesting. And I do see some that are 1s. In general, most people are very similar to your score. They have a couple that are on the higher numbers and a couple that are on the lower numbers. Typically, when you look at the Kolbe, there usually is one category where you're like, oh, you're pretty clear up in this range. But yeah, there are definitely some people that are on one end or the other. And it's interesting when you work with people, or when you have that insight about yourself, when you're on one of those extremes, then you're like, oh, this makes so much sense, because those of us in the middle can kind of go back and forth. And, one of the things that the Kolbe isn't intended to do, it's intended to give you insight about your instinct, because it recognizes that when you're working out of your instinct, that's where stress comes from.
Yeah.
So going back to that, if you have to do the budget for a company and you're like, I don't know why the budget is so stressful to me, it's probably because of the Kolbe score, right? And so what it does is it allows us to say, now I recognize why this is such a stressful piece, because I'm actually working outside of what my instinct is. And it allows us to pull in support so that things are not so stressful.
Yeah. So how can an individual really, how can they use that for like their results to really handle some of these things like the stress or, or productivity?
That's a great question. So when you take the Kolbe, the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to get a really clear picture on what things don't work for you. And the Kolbe is meant to empower us to stop doing the things that don't work for us. And that 4 number result can actually help you focus your time and energy so that you're more productive, because we're also recognizing if you're not working within your instinct, then you're probably also not working very effectively. And so the Kolbe score will direct you towards where you should spend your time and energy so that you can be more productive. And it will actually also allow you to identify which things potentially you're not supposed to be doing because they cause so much stress, so that you can either delegate, or you can just simply say, I don't need to do this, type of thing. Or you can build a team that is, complementary of your strengths and so forth.
Yeah. Can it also help you in life? I mean, we talked about business, work. How about in life in general?
Yeah, it can help you in relationships across the board, whether it's a relationship with a loved one, a relationship with a coworker. I know my kids' Kolbe scores also, so that I can support them in how I communicate and the things that I ask them to do. And even just knowing my husband's Kolbe, I know, for example, if I send him to the store and I just tell him to get dinner, it's going to be a very stressful situation for him, because he is a low fact finder. So he's not going to think about recipes. He's not going to look recipes up or products up. So I know when he goes to the store, I have to structure it for him and say, like, this is what we need. Right. And so that obviously can be something that can help our relationship if I understand where, what my husband's Kolbe is in terms of things that I don't ask him to budget, because he is not a structured person.
Okay.
Right. And so that helps us, because I know that in the past, before I knew about Kolbe, budgeting would be something that we would argue about. I would be like, don't you look at the bank account and, this and the taxes? And I would feel like he doesn't care, or he's not financially responsible. And, and we would butt heads over it. But now understanding that that's actually not the case, his instinct isn't just to be that structured. Now we can balance our relationship and our marriage when it comes to household things, and so forth. So I think it's really helpful. I know all of my family's Kolbes, which not only was fun because I was like, that makes a lot of sense. But again, I know who I can turn to when I need something, or who's going to, if I need to brainstorm, I know who to call. If I need an actual plan, I know who not to call, and so it can help in that manner too.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. I think I'm gonna like sign up all my kids to take the
Yes.
course. All my family members, including my husband. I think this is like so fascinating and
It
such.
really is. It
Yeah.
really is. And I teach college, and I even tell my students, like, you guys should go take the Kolbe, because it gives us just so much insight. And I think it also gives us some breathing room and the ability to relax around things where we're like, maybe we have negative self-talk around things that we don't do well or things that we can't do. Maybe we're like, I don't know why I always do this when it comes to this task. But
Mm.
I think it's just so important for both professional and personal growth to just have insight on yourself and be able to say, oh, that's why that is always such a stressful situation for me.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
exactly. I think that's a really great, it's a great tool for that. So when I was speaking to you pre-show, you indicated that there's three types of Kolbe tests. There's the Kolbe A, the B, and the C. Can you just
Yes.
give us a quick difference for the audience, what those are, the differences?
Yeah, so the Colby A test is that personal test that's going to measure your instinctive ways to take action. And you can use it for yourself to be more productive, to be less stressed around certain tasks, to be able to just unlock insight both with yourself at work and with your dynamics with your family. And that's, I know, the one that you took, and that's what most of us will take as individuals. And then there's the the Colby B test. And the Colby B measures a person's perception of their own job responsibilities. So for anybody who is in a position, whether it's a CEO position, maybe it's an administrative position, maybe you're a teacher, whatever it may be, the Colby B is actually going to give you insight on how you think your roles are in your job. And what it's meant to do is it's meant to be compared to your Colby A, to be able to say, like, oh, so in this job of how I think I'm supposed to be, this is opposite of how I actually am. And it can allow us either to open conversations for how we're doing our jobs or what our roles and responsibilities are, or at the very least, it can give us insight again on, okay, now I understand why grading papers is so painful for me, for example.
Yeah. And then the
Yeah.
Kolbe C?
And then the Colby C is really meant to be used in a work setting. And the Colby C measures the functional expectation of a specific position. So if you, Christine, for example, was ready to bring on some team members, you could take the Colby C based on the positions that you want to hire for. So let's say you're like, I need a COO, I need a CFO. You would take the Colby C to define what a Colby score would look like for your perfect COO and your perfect CFO. And then through the hiring process, you could have people take the Colby A and you could compare whose Colby is closest to how I envision them being in that role in my company.
Yeah, wow. So that's interesting. There are these different iterations of it that can help
Mhm.
you in different capacities, which I think is amazing. Well, you have been so generous to allow people with the trigger word hashtag Colby and Shine. That's KOLBE and Shine, Colby and Shine. That they would have 15 minutes with you to sort of assess their Colby score and talk to you about that. So
Yes.
for anybody who wants to connect with Kelly, put in the hashtag Colby and Shine, and Kelly will jump on a call and for 15 minutes and kind of give you a little window and a little insight into your specific Colby
Mhm.
score. So thank you for offering that. I appreciate
You're
that.
welcome.
And this was so fascinating. I am so intrigued by this. I think it's such an important tool for people in
Mhm.
business to really use to assess others or to really assess themselves so they can be better leaders, really.
Yeah.
Um, as we close, I'm about to wrap up with our little Waist Up Wardrobe recap. Tell me, is there anything else we should know about the Colby and the role? And I'm just going to reiterate with the hashtag Colby and Shine. Kelly will give you 15 minutes of really digging deep into your very own assessment.
Yeah, I think the number one thing to remember for anybody who's going to go take the Kolbe is that there is no bad score. So the Kolbe is just a true reflection of who you are. Whether you have a high or low number, that does not reflect any kind of positive or negative connotation. And the other thing is, I would just encourage anybody who feels stress around certain situations, whether it's your work situation or there's something at home where you have some resistance against, to take the Kolbe, because it can give you some really good insight. And more importantly, especially if we get on a call, we can talk about tools and strategies to use to kind of help relieve some of that stress around some of the things, some of the roles that you might have either in your work or in your family.
Wow. Well, thank you
Yeah,
so much. That is such
you're
good
welcome.
advice. And thank you for being here. And I'm just going to go ahead and wrap up this amazing show. I feel like it's one that people can come back to. And so many people
Yeah.
listen on the replay too and just get educated. I think we took a topic that looks very overwhelming because there are so many assessments out there, and we really boiled it down to some nuggets. And the Waist Up Wardrobe weekly wrap up, the main takeaway here is remember what Kelly said. She said that there is no bad score when it comes to Kolbe. Your score is the perfect score, and it's just an assessment of how you take action when you strive. And so that you have to remember that. And a tool to remember if you want to get yourself assessed and do a Kolbe A test as for you as an individual, go to kolbe.com. A couple tips to remember is look at the results and use the results to see where you can better maybe improve your stress factors. If you are feeling a little bit of stress in your current position, or if you're feeling a little stress as a leader, or if you're feeling like any stress in relationships, by taking the Kolbe, you might be able to kind of undo some of that, because you might just need to be thinking about it and looking at it differently. So think about that. And finally, action item. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go and have every member of my family take the Kolbe test at kolbe.com, because I would love to have some insight into how we can all sort of interact as a team. So there you have it, the Waist Up Wardrobe weekly wrap up. And we'll see you next time, same place at 11:30 live here on Thursday, where we're going to bring you a new fresh show. So think about joining us and bring a friend. That was so good. It was
Good. That was fun.
Thank you so much. This is like, honestly, like I am going to be directing so many people to this because I have these conversations all the time when it comes to Kolbe. Thank you. I just, it was so good. I enjoyed it so much.
Good. Good. You're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah, that was fun. I enjoyed
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And we'll, this will be like evergreen. So if you ever want to direct somebody to or anything, they can come to the Facebook page. And when people listen to replay, and if they did the hashtag, it'll show up in the comments because we tell them to put it on there.
Okay, perfect.
All right.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye, Kelly.
Bye. Bye, Rick.
Bye. Nice meeting you. Okay. Oh, you ready?
I am ready. Yes, for the wrap up. I sure
Yeah.
am. Okay.
Okay.
Episode 97. Okay.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Okay.
Start when you're ready.
All right. How do I usually start? Do I start with an episode? Oh, I know. Okay. So if you're in business for yourself, or you're if you're in business for yourself or you're in the entrepreneurial world, you've definitely heard about the KOLBE assessment. It's a tool that companies, employers, and experts use to measure how people, strive when they are trying to do something. I'm going to try that again. How they take action when they strive. Okay. So if you're in an entrepreneurial world or you're a business person, so if you're in the entrepreneurial world or you're a business owner, you probably are familiar with the KOLBE assessment because this is a tool that companies use or employers use to measure how individuals take action when they strive. So in this episode, we discuss all of this with an expert so that you can use this tool to be more productive, less stressed, and even happier in life.
That was good.
Okay.
Part 2.
Mm-hmm. So in episode 97, the KOLBE Test, we discuss everything about the KOLBE Test. And the Waist Up Wardrobe weekly wrap-up in a nutshell was that the main takeaway is your KOLBE score, your individualized KOLBE score is a perfect score because there is no bad score. There's no negative or positive score. It is really a perfect score for who you are and how you take action. The tool to use here is the kolbe.com tool where you can go and take the KOLBE A assessment for you as an individual. And here's a tip. When you take the assessment, look at the 4 categories and assess where you are in your workplace, if you are really fitting into those right roles that is utilizing your skills the best. And finally, action item. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go and have all my family members take the KOLBE assessment because I want to know how I can interact and delegate and work together as a team even better.
Perfect.
All right. All right, let's kill the
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hold on.